Thank you for staying with us. Voice of the People, 96.1 FM, Abuja. This is time for us to discuss the issues, the pertinent issues in our nation today. We call it VOP Roundup. And over the next hour, we're going to be discussing something that happened in the country today, something very pertinent among other issues. Today, we're going to be talking about Supreme Court's decisions over 8 different states in Nigeria. This went on and on and on all through most of the day. It's basically what has been on the minds of Nigerians. It's been a very busy day today in the courts, and it just reaffirms the concern that has been raised by many Nigerians that the 2023 electoral process ended up with so many litigations going all the way to the Supreme Courts. Given a situation whereby the courts have a major say in determining the outcome of elections, would Nigerians, the question I'm asking now is, wouldn't Nigerians prefer a situation where they are the major determinants of the elections? Shouldn't Nigerians be the ones to choose who would lead them as opposed to the courts? Because, the job of the judiciary is the job of the judiciary. If it is taken away from Nigerians the rights to choose who leads them, then what then is the sense of a democracy? Do you think that we should look at a second look should be put into the electoral and the constitution as well? There are many issues and there are many questions. And joining us to have this conversation today to shine light on this subject is a development consultant, an author, and a public affairs analyst. A gentleman of the press to the core. We have joining us today, Jide Ojo. Good evening, sir.
Yeah, good evening. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you very much for taking out the time. Like I like to say, let us hit the ground running. Like I usually say, today was a very busy day in the courts. Let's look at it. This is the most litigated election in the history of Nigerian democracy. Now, for an election that the INEC promised to be top tier, and then we spent billions of hard-earned taxpayer money on. In your opinion, how did we get here?
Well, we got here because we are in a litigious society. It wasn't more because INEC did not do a thorough job. Most of the cases that ended up the Supreme Court were pre-election matters. There are over 1,000 of such pre-election matters that eventually got to the Supreme Court. And when you look at election dispute resolution, that happens to be part of our jurisprudence. And it's a global phenomenon that is not limited to Nigeria. It might not be appropriate to say this is the most litigated elections. We have 2007 elections where there are over 2,000 litigations. But when you look at the fact that the Constitution has given the rights to all contestants and their political parties to challenge nominations and the outcome of elections at the court, then you understand that there are so many frivolous cases that eventually ended up in courts and that were duly dismissed. The ones we are talking about, I've done the statistics, my sister, and I discovered that there were barely less than 3% of the less than 3% of all the cases that were taken to court were found to have merit. So it's not even up to 10%. Because I recall that when INEC came out around November or early December to meet with political parties and said that they were going to have rerun and court-ordered by-elections and rerun, which is scheduled for February 3rd now, that INEC gave a statistics at that time that these 34 elections where they are going to have rerun and by-elections represent about 2.8% of cases that went to court. So how do you adjudge an election to be a failure when the statistics is telling you something different? And then, as at that time, the resolution of the four gubernatorial elections that were nullified, either at the court of first instance or the court of second instance, have not been decided. Now, these are the cases that have been decided today, save for that of Nasarawa, which I believe is still outstanding. But at least the case in Kano, the case in Zamfara, the case in Plateau, which are cases gubernatorial elections that have been earlier nullified by the courts at either the court of first instance, which is the tribunal, or at the court of appeal, as was the case with the Plateau and the case with Zamfara. All of them have been laid to rest, and they all were in favor of what INEC had originally declared. So we need to be very circumspect when we are passing judgment on our election, because if facts are sacred, if data is a proof, data and statistics is a guide to analysis, then students of statistics will tell you that the 2023 elections is not as bad as many Nigerians want to paint it.
Okay, so now let's use Kano State as, a point of reference where we have the NNPC versus the APC. One of the reasons, one of the things that came up in court was the membership of a political party and, another political party being able to inquire about the membership of another political party. And then the second is the question that has been asked by several Nigerians: should a candidate be punished for omissions or mistakes that are made by the INEC? Because, if you remember in this case, the tribunal had originally ruled in favor of Yusuf Kabir Abba when the matter went to the appeal court. They ruled that about 158,000 ballot papers were not stamped, and therefore they rendered those votes invalid, and then it led to a deduction of 165,656 votes from Abba Yusuf, and the appeal court said that Gawuna should be given the certificate of return after being withdrawn from Abba Yusuf. Should when we have situations like that, do you think that it is fair for Nigerians to start to push for a reform of the Electoral Act?
No, Chinwe, let's be very dispassionate about this. You see, even in civil service, there are levels and layers of authority. What happened at the appellate court has been invalidated. That's why the people of Kano are today rejoicing. And thankfully, there was that opportunity for the case to come to the Supreme Court. In the public service and even where you are working, I'm sure you have bosses to whom you report. Sometimes your boss can offend you, and if you lodge a complaint, the one that is above him or her can also look into that case. Now, there are two cases, there were two key points in Kano election. First was the fact that the APC said that Abba Yusuf, by virtue of Section 77 sub C of the Electoral Act, was not a member of NNPP as at the time he was nominated as candidate of NNPP in Kano State. That was one. Two was what eventually happened at the appellate court, where the APC now said there were approximately 150-something thousand votes that they discovered did not have the annex stamp and the signature of the presiding officer on those on those ballot paper. But when I listened to the 5-man panel, which unanimously upheld the election of Abba Yusuf, what they said were two things. First, the issue of nomination, as espoused in Section 77 sub C, that is a pre-election matter, and that even when you read that section of the law of Section 77, it did not prescribe penalty for any political party that did not submit the list of its members to INEC. But on the substantive issue of ballot papers that are not duly stamped and signed, I have been involved in training of poll officials, and we have always said that any ballot paper that is not stamped and signed by the presiding officer is invalid. But what their lordship said today was that they found out that 146,000 of this so-called invalid ballot paper did have INEC stamp and signature, but does not have date and cannot be said to be invalid. Now, this is where I'm coming to. The fact that a lower court erred in law, that was what led to appeal. That was why there was an appellate court to do substantial justice. And let me tell you this, it's within the rights of any contestant to ventilate their views at the court, whether at the court of first instance, second, at the appellate court. What I see more as a miscarriage of justice because of time constraint. Let me go straight to that. What I see as a miscarriage of justice in what happened today is that the lower court, the Court of Appeal and the Court of First Instance that invalidated the election of PDP members in Plateau State do not have a remedy because their cases could not get to the Supreme Court. The case of there were only two key positions that gets to Supreme Court: that of presidential contest and that of governorship contest. Unfortunately, the senator in Plateau State, about 6 or 5 House of Reps member in Plateau State, and the 11 State House of Assembly member of Plateau State, whose elections were nullified, arising from the miscarriage of justice by the Court of Appeal, that because there was no valid nomination, valid party primary in Plateau, these people were sacked. That was the same basis that Governor Caleb Muftwang was sacked. But now the Supreme Court now said, look, this is a pre-election matter, and that this is a miscarriage of justice, and that the lower court erred in law by nullifying the election of Muftwang. Now, unfortunately for the senator that was sacked, whose position Samuel Lalong went to take, and for this about 5 or 6 House of Reps members, including that of Honorable Bagos and that lady, the daughter of former governor of Plateau State, I've forgotten his name, whose daughter has been in the House of Reps for about 5 or 6 times, whose election was equally affected because the Court of Appeal said there was no proper primary, there was no structure, PDP structure in Plateau State, and as a result, the Court of Appeal did not look at the proper election, but was looking at the nomination. That was the one that pained me most in the judgment that came out today.
Benilar.
God bless you. Thank you for helping me checking out. Benilar. The case of Benilar, Honorable Bagos, and about 4 or 5 others who were members of House of Reps, whose election were nullified as a result of the Court of Appeal decision that the PDP had no structure and as such could not field candidates. That was the most painful thing because unfortunately for senatorial House of Reps, State House of Assembly election, they all terminate at the Court of Appeal. Now, it's only Governor Caleb Muftwang who was gracious enough to get a Supreme Court decision that favored it. So what happens? How do you remedy the miscarriage that have happened at the lower court? That is the most painful thing that I feel terribly bad about today's decision, particularly in the case of Plateau State. But then it's a learning curve for us. I believe that what has happened today should be a lesson that when a superior court, the Supreme Court, have decided on a case, it should be binding on the lower court. I recall that this same issue about nomination and qualification were already settled when the Supreme Court gave decisions in the case of APC, PDP, and Labour Party in November or December last year, when they ruled on the appeals from Atiku Abubakar and that of Peter Obi, that the cases of the cases around qualification and nomination are already pre-election matter that cannot be argued at the post-election phase. So that is just the most painful thing, because now the Plateau members, House of Reps, State House of Assembly, and Senator, they have been made to suffer collateral damage. And assuming that it was the pre-2011 situation in Nigeria, where the election of governors also terminated at the Court of Appeal, I tell you for free, Governor Ele-Muftuang will not have remained the governor. Because as at the time of 1999, 2003 to 2007, election petition concerning governorship election terminates at the Court of Appeal. But now, I think it's wiser for the National Assembly to have amended the Constitution to now allow appeals from governorship election to terminate at the Supreme Court. And that's why I will applaud their lordship at the Supreme Court, that they have done substantive justice today and have given Nigeria peace of mind. Because in all of those states that have been on edge, states like Kano, like Zamfara, like Plateau, that have been on edge ahead of today's Supreme Court decision, you can see that the political temperature in those states have really calmed down, and people were jubilating. People were happy that their mandate has been restored.
Thank you, Mr. Jide. Now I have this. What's your take on this suggestion that has been made? Given that we've stated that one of the sad things that have happened is the situation in Plateau State with the senator and the other members of the House of Assembly that had to be sacked away from their offices based on the same thing that happened with the governor. What's your take on the suggestion that winners of election should be sworn into office after electoral petitions are done, after the cases are done in court? Given that in a country like Nigeria, once someone has been sworn in, the person has an upper hand. Do you think it would be good to roll that out, that whoever wins whatever election should be sworn in after all of the litigations are done in court? That way there's a leveling ground between all of the candidates.
Now, we need to be very careful what we are asking for. You see, I've observed the election in at least 4 other countries apart from Nigeria. I've observed the election in US, I've observed the election in Uganda, in Ghana, and in Egypt. And I know that, the recommendation that the election petition should be disposed of before the assumption of office of the winner. If you do that, there is an assumption in law that justice you will not be giving fair hearing to the petitioner. Now, this is what I mean. In Uganda, just like in Kenya, cases just go to the Constitutional Court or the Court of Appeal, or the Constitutional Court or their Supreme Court. Now, you have a country like Nigeria where this last election there was 1,044 petitions. Can the Supreme Court deal with those petitions in 2 weeks? That would be overwhelming. I believe that what we have right now pays us best. let them assume office. It still doesn't confer on them the ability to subvert justice, because the justice, the will of justice is always very slow but sure. And there is no timeline. Let me quickly tell you this, Chinwe. Before, in 1999, 2003, and 2007, there used to be no time limit before election petition. You can take almost 3 years to argue your case. But now, there is time limit, 180 days at the court of first instance, which is at the tribunal. Then there is 60 days at the court of appeal, and then another 60 days at the Supreme Court. That is for presidential and governorship election. For the other positions like Senate, House of Reps, State House of Assembly, it starts at the tribunal for 160 days and 180 days, rather 6 months, then terminates at the Court of Appeal, which has 60 days, 2 months, to look into the cases. It is better to leave it this way, but let our judges be bound by Supreme Court decisions. Not that they will be acting contrary to what Supreme Court has already decided. That is where the problem lies.
All right, now for time constraints, I had so many more questions to ask, but in want of time, just quickly in conclusion, a minute or two, what are the lessons you think can be learned by both Nigerians, the INEC, the courts, and of course the politicians that are all involved in this? What can we all learn?
My appeal goes to the political class to allow due process. If they will only allow due process and stop influencing the judges, so stop inducing them, stop pressurizing them to act contrary to the will of the people, there will be peace, there will be progress, and then we will have the best of elections, we will have the best of judiciary. It is the political class that is undermining our developmental progress in terms of democracy. And that is why my warning is to them to learn to live by due process. Let's follow due process in all that we do. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you for joining us on the program. We really do appreciate your insights and your time.
Oh, thank you. Sorry.
Have a good evening, sir. And that brings us to a close on that interview. Still to come, we're still discussing the elections and the Supreme Court's decisions. Don't forget, today, the Supreme Court delivered final decisions on 8 states. They gave their final governorship election, their final decisions on the 8 different disputes on the elections from Lagos, Kano, Zamfara, Ebonyi states, Lagos states, among others. We're going to continue with the conversation. Just a quick breather to give you some information about the station. Stay tuned. When we come back, we have a political economic down on what the outcomes are and what it means for Nigerians moving forward. Has the voice of the people been heard in every state? Is this what we needed? Did we have to go through the rigors that we went through in order to get to this place? Stay tuned. More to come.
Have you ever wondered if your opinion matters? Do you know that your voice can change the narrative? Your voice matters. Lend your voice today. Become a part of our family on Voice of the People 96.1 FM Abuja. Voice of the People 96.1 FM Abuja. Now you have a voice.
Variety is the spice of our station.
Voice of the People 96.1 FM Abuja. Now you have a voice.
Check out our show schedule online for information on what's coming up.
Voice of the People, 96.1 FM.
Now you have a voice.
Korea muryar masu sauraro mita 96.1 zangon FM Abuja.
Yanzu kuna da murya.
Thank you for staying with us. The Supreme Court has today, Friday, the 12th of January, laid to rest the disputes over the outcomes of the March 2023 governorship elections in 8 states. Lagos, Kano, Zamfara, Ebonyi, Plateau State, Abia State, Cross River, and Bauchi. Now, these cases started at various election petitions tribunals in the various states, and they gave rise to decisions. Of course, it was the aggrieved parties that held there, and they had appealed against the Court of Appeal, and subsequently the Supreme Court is the third and the final level of appeal on governorship election disputes. Now, more attention was on some of the states, Kano State and Plateau State. Of course, they were bound to receive more attention considering, the journey that these states have gone through. They are the ones that have, of course, I think Zamfara comes close, but these are the states that had different results from the two courts, right? In the other states, of course, the lower states had already, the lower courts had already agreed that, they upheld each other's judgments. But in Plateau State, Kano State, we had, the Court of Appeal overturn the decisions of the tribunal. Exactly. And there was a lot of tension in Nigeria today, especially in Kano State and in Plateau State. We saw high presence of security operatives, especially in Kano State, and of course, in Plateau State as well, but especially in Kano State. It was a battle between the NNPP and the APC. Exactly. Some people would describe it as a battle between Kwankwaso and Ganduje, considering that in Kano State there is a whole Kwankwasia movement, like a cult followership of Kwankwaso, and he's the face of the NMPC, and of course Ganduje and the APC. Joining us to have this conversation, in-house analyst of the Voice of the People and also political analyst, who I just found out today is royalty because there's an Ade in front of his name. Very interesting fact. Thank you for joining us, Ade Folarin Olamilekon.
Thanks for having me. A very good evening to all our listeners out there.
Thank you very much. Let's get into the conversation proper. What are your thoughts regarding, I'll get to Kano and Plateau State. I feel that's where the meat is. But what are your thoughts regarding, the rulings of the Supreme Court in all of these 8 states?
I think practically the Supreme Court have put the seal on the entire election petition that just ended for the 8 states in Nigeria today. Meaning that there is nothing anybody can do about the judgment again. It has come, it has ended, and the governors who have been affirmed to have won the election, they will sit in that power, carry out the administrative work, carry out the development work without anybody hindering them until 2027, when another election will come. So the major things I see from this is that at least the peace in those states have returned. The 8 states that their judgment come today, the peace have returned. It is now time for the governors to sit down and begin to vote for in that particular state. That is bringing development to the people and not disappointing the people, as we have already known that it must not be something that we must see in this current administration going forward.
Now, I think you heard some of the conversation we had with Mr. Jido Ojo, exactly. And we raised questions have been raised about a number of things.
Exactly.
First off, let's talk about the pre-election matters, because that came up, and that is a very pertinent question.
Exactly.
We saw in the especially in the courts of appeal. That was what was used as a tool. Vis-a-vis the choice of the people, because a candidate, regardless of what happens in the pre-election, the candidates were presented to Nigerians. Nigerians went to the polls and they lent their voices. Vis-a-vis the choice of the nation, how important are pre-election matters?
Very interesting. Pre-election matters are very, very powerful. They define the kind of party politics that we play. You know, one thing most of our politicians have forgotten in when it comes to pre-election matters is that most times they bend the rules, and that's why we talk about poor internal democracy in our political parties. But what will germinate and lead to problems at the pre-election matter is what the political party do before they even go to the election. That is, who they nominate for the position they are vying for, and how they be able to nominate that person for that position. Because if they don't do it properly, it becomes a challenge that ignorantly the opposition will use it them when it comes to petition at the election. And that's why you see that most times this is all about pre-election matters that feature majorly on the petition of most political parties. Most of them are not looking at whether there is electoral violence, because in critical aspect of this election issue, what the Electoral Act really specified that you can take to election petition is that you must be able to mention about electoral violence, be able to talk about ballot snatching, be able to prove about issues that have to do with failure of INEC to carry out the election. But most times, the political parties will rely on pre-election matters as a means to fight their way at the tribunal. And most times, they may lose. And most times, the court may also be ignorant of the law. Just like what we see in what happened in Plateau case, as well as other cases that happen. But at the end of the day, Supreme Court has been able to establish that pre-election matters should not even be entertained when it comes to the real issue of tribunal in election.
We've had precedents being overturned.
Exactly.
Like in the courts of appeal in Kano State. In the case of Kano State, there were precedents, but then, the court of appeal did not even hold it.
At all.
Now, how are we sure that this decision by how can we trust that the decision by the Supreme Court today that pre-election matters should not be brought in and used as a tool to, overturn the will of the people again? How are we sure that is going to be held by the, lower courts?
I think it's going to serve as a precedent court judgment cases. Meanwhile, what it means is that every other time that a judge want to make use of or want to decide on a particular election, and there is pre-election issues raised by the petitioner or by the prosecuting party, then the judge will have to look at what has happened in the same similar case before, and that's where it comes. Because not like what our first analysts talk about is that the Supreme Court will now have opportunity to now strengthen our electoral processes, because we now begin to understand that pre-election matter doesn't have a weight when it comes to the real meat of election petition. But one thing I understand about Nigerian electoral system is that, or political system or court cases, that the lawyers of the petitioner are majorly the ones that normally bring this issue up. Meanwhile, the meat of the issue they're supposed to take a court, they will not take it. Take for instance the issue of electoral violence. They're supposed to help them to even strengthen the argument in court. They don't look at that one. They will go for issue of qualification of the candidate. They will go for issue of the candidate neither being a member of the political party or not being a member of the political party, or whether the candidate's name is on the list of the registered members of the political party. And by the time you take all this up to court, particularly if it goes to Supreme Court, the Supreme Court will strike it out. But the aspect of Court of Appeal not striking that out is a major challenge that we know that with this new dispensation that we have gotten from Supreme Court today, it means that any pre-election matter that come before the Court of Appeal, although the tribunal may not have power to deal with it, but Court of Appeal will have power to deal with pre-election matter that doesn't have any substance in re-petition in a particular election issue. But we must let all petitioners know, if you are going to court, especially Court of Appeal, remove the issue of pre-election matter, because it will not sell water, or it will not sell for you by the time you get to Supreme Court.
I want to ask a question about APC's interest in Kano, but before I do that, now let's do a rundown. Now, the Supreme Court affirmed the election of Bala Muhammad.
Exactly.
This is just to give, the facts of this matter to the people. Now, the Supreme Court affirmed the election of Bala Muhammad of the PDP as Bauchi State Governor. And of course, the appellate court, of course, also had done. So that was them affirming what the appellate court did. In Kano State, the Supreme Court reversed the sack of Abba Yusuf, right, as Kano governor, maintaining that the Court of Appeal was wrong in affirming the decision of the tribunal. And that was that Yusuf Abba Yusuf did not win the majority of lawful votes that were cast in the governorship election.
Not that he did not win. What they by the time they subtract the 156,000 votes, his vote was reduced.
Yes, so he didn't win.
You know what they did. But if they have not left that particular one, nobody will say he didn't win.
Yeah, of course, because they used the.
Now cut him.
Now, what was interesting to me, Adefolarin, was in determining the case. You know that the Supreme Court raised two issues, and those issues stood out. They said whether the low court was right in deducting the. Whether the low court was right in deducting the 156,616 votes for the governor, and the Justice Okoro held that the tribunal was wrong in doing that, right? And that just gave people a little bit of which,
and
of
you know
course,
what it means. What it means is that the 156,000 vote was now validated by the Supreme Court. Now, Dauda Lawal of Zamfara State was affirmed. He was affirmed, so we got that. If you also look at that one too, it's about vote that was violated, that was made invalid.
Absolutely.
In 3 local government.
Absolutely.
What it means is that those ones reverted back and added back to him, and that's how. Because if they have left it like that, that means.
There would have had to be a rerun in 3 local government areas of the state, which of course the Apex Court said, no, we're not going to do that. This person actually emerged winner, and he did. Your points are invalid. Now we have Nwifuru of Ebonyi State, and he was also affirmed. He was affirmed. He is of the All Progressives Congress, right? So he is the governor of Ebonyi State.
There was also the issue of qualification on that.
On the Nwifuru's case,
but it was also a pre-election matter. So the Supreme Court definitely nullified that one.
Absolutely. Caleb Mutfwang of Plateau State. The sack of Caleb Mutfwang was reversed, right? And it was held that the validity of his nomination and sponsorship was not a valid ground for to void an election, which of course we have stated pre-election issues. Governor Oti of Abia State.
But although the one of the Plateau is a big lesson, maybe I know we'll come to that.
We'll come to that. I'm trying to give a rundown so that there's somewhere there's a question behind the rundown. There's a question behind the rundown. Now the Supreme Court affirmed, of course, the election of Alex Oti of Abia State.
That one also has pre-election issue because the majority of the people said Alex Oti became a Labour Party candidate at the dying minute. That he was never a member of Labour Party.
But then, I mean, he held that they have failed to substantially prove non-compliance in their appeal.
Exactly.
So it's about what they proved. And like I was having a conversation with my colleague earlier, sometimes it's not how good your case is, it's how good your lawyer is some of the time. Now, Basi Otu of Cross River State was upheld. His election was upheld, right, as well. Yusuf versus Gawuna, which we touched on a little bit, Kano State. The judgment was, of course, held up. Of course, was upheld. The Court of Appeal said that they confirmed that the NNPP did win. And
you know one thing about Kano and Plateau is that the issue about technicality of the court was put to test by the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court used. And you know one thing about the Supreme Court is that they use wisdom, and they also look at the Constitution as well spread when it comes to elections.
Now, the question that I do have for you, and for you listening,
Akwa Ibom.
Oh, of course, Akwa Ibom as well.
Akwa Ibom
and Lagos.
And Lagos too also had the issue of qualification. And
whatnot, and then we have
whether it's in Nigeria or not, as well as, although they didn't talk about whether it's a member of APC, but they'll talk about his qualification, his WAEC result, as well as his deputy not having a dual citizenship stuff.
I mean, there was a whole back and forth that went on, especially in Lagos State, because it was a joint fight in Lagos. It was the Labour Party and the PDP going against the APC. But of course, it's settled. I think the only state left of the 36 is
we still have Kaduna as well as
Nasarawa states, and we're looking forward to seeing how that is going to turn out. Now, the question that I do have to ask is: has the courts spoken the minds of Nigerians? Does the court's decisions today truly reflect the heart of Nigerians? I mean, there are places where you would see, like Plateau State and Kano State, which we of course have established that they are very, very dicey ones and they're very tricky ones. You see people all over the streets celebrating, rejoicing. But then the question is, do you think that this decision...
Number one answer I will first put out is that the court is also part of our society, and the court is part of our electoral process. So anytime there is dispute, anytime there is no issue that has to do with validation, vote, malpractice, the court must always come in to intervene and to let the matter be put to rest, just like what have happened today. Now, the voice of the people, whether the people are happy, whether the people are angry, definitely a lot of people will be happy because the decision that has been taken is to their own favor. Where the other set of people will be angry because the decision that has been taken is not to their own favor. So it's going to be a mixed reaction. But in two states that we know that the joy, the happiness will be so much in essence is Kano and Plateau State. Reason being that these are the two states that wish and hope the opposition could take over the realms of power. If you understand what I mean, but especially in Plateau State, it has been the desire of the people that PDP should come back. You get it, and it happens that the people vote massively for PDP and they won the election. The same thing in Kano. They have also prayed and hoped that NPP will come back as a result of the Godfather syndrome behind NPC, because we need to acknowledge that Kwankwaso legend way of doing politics in Kano have so much infected a lot of people that they believe that he must come back to power. If you remember, he was in APC, although he was in PDP, went to APC, then left APC, then formed his own political party that we have today as ANPC. So it's all about who is going to favor under a political party that have won, and the one that Supreme Court have said, have a field day, you are the one that have won the election, and that's what we are going to have. So everybody is happy because their own candidate has won the election. I wish it's the other way around. Definitely you will be complaining here and there. So we just have to say that it is all around that the court must also take decision that will definitely make the people to be happy, or sometimes it could be against the people. Like for instance, the people that the political party that lost in Abia State, the PDP has been in power in Abia State for more than 20 years. So they are losing power to Labour Party. And you know, even the person that is in power as Labour Party candidate was one time a PDP person. But you can see the change that have come now. Are you going to say that the PDP people will be happy? Definitely the ones that believe so much in the party will not be happy. But the other ones that have joined Labour Party to now have a stake in the government will definitely be happy. So it's all about whose pendulum that is swing to. It is either to this way, to the left or to the right. And that's what brings the joy in this matter. But for me, the court will always have a voice. The court will always play a role in electoral processes.
Talking about the court playing a role, now we've had people like SA and Femi Falana come out to ask a very pertinent question. Do the courts get to decide for Nigerians? And I mean, you would understand where that question is coming from, especially with the way that the lower courts were playing. Just overturning elections and you know, putting the people, and we had this not just in the governorship race that we're talking about now. We've seen it earlier in the earlier conversation we had with Gideon. We spoke about how, you know, 5 members of the House of Assembly, Plateau State, the minority leader Simon Mwadkon were being sacked, and you know, the beneficiary of that, which is also a subject on its own, beneficiary of that happens to be the former Minister of Labour, Simon Lalong, who then left being minister to go to become to take the seat of the sacked Mwadko. Of course,
he was there in the Senate for 8 years before he went to become a governor. Now he has
went back.
back and
I mean, one will beg to ask, who who decides? Is it the Nigerian people or is it the courts?
For me, it starts from the political parties. The political parties members are Nigerians. They carried out an activities that go contrary to their own internal democracy. So they create that opportunity whereby the court now have to come in and decide using the scope of the law. But that scope of the law is not entirely without human interpretation. I hope you are getting me. So the court, the judges must interpret the law in a way that suits what you present to the court. That's why you say when you go to court, the judges are not for their Christmas, or the court is not for their Christmas. It's how you present your case in the court that matter. Take for instance the issue of the Plateau State and the sack of the 5 House of Reps members, the State House of Assembly. What really happened was that the political party in Plateau State failed to carry out the Congress that would become at least very, very
are these not the pre-election issues that the Supreme Court is saying, well, this is not basis for overturning the voice of the people? Because like I earlier asked Folari, these people, the people of Nigeria saw these candidates. They might or might not have known what happened, behind closed doors or how they went. But a party came out and said, oh, this is our member. And there was a whole period. The primaries, we were involved in these primaries, or at least we saw these primaries. And you come out as a party and say, this is the person that we want to run. And the people have come out to say, oh, we want that person. For example, in the minority seat situation now in Plateau State, where Honorable Simon Mwakon was replaced, and it's very coincidental that they are both Simons, was replaced with Honorable Simon Lalong. The people have said we want Mutfwang, and the courts are saying you get Lalong. How do we move from here now that the Supreme Court has said? Because sadly. The House of Assembly can't do anything about the situation at this point. But how do we move on from here when the Supreme Court has said if it's pre-election, it's not valid?
I think what we need to do is to put pressure on the political parties to do things rightly. For me, we can't blame the court. We can't even blame the Court of Appeal or the tribunal for nullifying the election of those 5 House of Reps members. We should put the blame on the political party, because if we go back to the Electoral Act per se, it has already stipulated how election can be conducted from the primaries to the main election, as we're supposed to have them. You get it? But what we have is that political parties just find way to have what we normally call in local parlance cut corners and get things done. So how will you conduct Congress in less than the 18 local government that you're supposed to conduct? So for me, it is not the fault of the court, but rather it is the blame of the political parties. Now, for me, political parties across Nigeria should begin to sit down and conduct their affair very, very well. Because when we talk about democracy, what it means is that the other local government that Congress was not conducted, they have been denied democratic input into who is going to become the leader, who is going to represent them at the end of the day. So it's not the fault of the court, but rather it is the fault of the political parties. Which the political parties have conducted all their affair in a democratic way. The court will not have any means to interfere in what they are doing.
I mean, we don't have so much time, and I have like 2 very important questions. One of it is, would you then say that Nigerians should begin to call for a reform of, the both the Constitution and the Electoral Act?
Definitely, there's about 1 billion budgeted for constitutional reform in the National Assembly. So that money must not be kept under the carpet or kept in one bank. They must use that money to carry out reform for Electoral Act as well as for the Constitution, particularly the areas that specifically affect election in Nigeria. Take for instance the issue of pre-election matters. Let us have it in Constitution that once pre-election matters happen, the petitioners must not write it as part of his prayers or his demand when he's going to the tribunal. Let us put a stop to that nonsense, because it's very frivolous. You understand what I mean? That when your lawyers are putting all the matters together, they should not put issue of qualification, because they are going to waste the time of the court. Because the Constitution already specifies how someone can be qualified to become a president, a governor, or a senator or whatever. So they should not begin to say, okay, this person has fake certificate, that's why he's not qualified to contest for election. Those ones they don't matter at all. Then secondly, we should also ensure that in our Constitution, the judgment that have come out today must be a precedent judgment that when next we have issue in election matters, the judges who are going to look at the matter should look at what the Supreme Court said, either this year or next year or year to come, so that when they are making such judgment, they'll be able to make a very profound judgment. Then lastly is to the political parties. Political parties have a lot of work to do. They must be able to educate their members. There is no need to cut corners. And the reason why most political parties will cut corners is because of the money bags that come into political parties. A lot of money bags are found in political parties, and that's why I see that they buy the ticket or nomination of the political parties and they run for election. But meanwhile, somebody is waiting for them that if you get to the Supreme Court or when you get to the petition, I will use court to collect the mandate from you. We have seen it happen severally in this country. But we want all those poorly exactly, we meet in court. So we want all those poorly internal democracy challenges that political parties are putting up, which now put pressure on the court to stop. And it can only stop when we have a reform of our constitution as well as the Electoral Act.
Thank you very much, Adefolarin.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much for your insights and very wonderful conversation. Like I said, I have many other questions, but
I wish you can throw one.
I mean, we don't have the time. I got to run out in a minute. All I've got to say right now is it's been a very beautiful conversation. Nigerians should reflect on the lessons learned from the recent wave of litigations. It is imperative for us to consider the measures that, we need to take to be able to restore and to be able to enhance public confidence in the democratic process. Accountability, transparency, and a thorough review of our electoral laws is essential. Very essential in rebuilding trust and reinforcing the foundation of democracy.
Exactly.
I mean, would you say in your closing that we've done a good job? Give a rating of the last election. Should Nigerians applaud, the courts? Should they applaud INEC? Is there more work to be done? And what should we begin doing? Because 2027 is not so far away.
It's not too far. For me, we applaud the court. We also applaud INEC. It's not easy to conduct election. And it's not also easy for the court to decide on some of these things. But the mess that the court are clearing for us, are clearing the August table, is caused by the political parties. So the pressure is now on the political party to do their internal democracy well, ensure that it is very purely democracy, and not to deny people by not conducting Congress. So they have to conduct Congress. And again, we also need to encourage all Nigerians. Now, 2027 is coming. We should all prepare and prepare. That is what I have to say.
Thank you very much. In conclusion, the challenges that have been faced by Nigeria in the aftermath of these 2023 elections, they are giving us an opportunity for reform and introspection. A collective effort to address these issues can contribute to the strengthening of the democratic system, ensuring that the people's voices remain the primary determinant in choosing their leaders. Don't forget, you can find this broadcast on YouTube at Voice of VOP 961. You can also find us across all of our social media platforms at VOP 961 and on Instagram at Voice of the VOP Abuja. My name is Chinwe Blessing. Thank you very much, Adefolarin Olamilekon, for joining us.
Thanks for always having me.
Thank you very much for always coming in whenever we reach out to you. Have a very beautiful, beautiful evening. Programs continue on Voice of the People 96.1 FM Abuja. For now, I'll be playing you very beautiful songs. Let's go back in